Well, I think that's an interesting question. I think trees, as the longest living organisms on Earth, are sentinels. They stand over people, time, and landscapes in a way that no other organism does. But they do very much more than that. They are in themselves islands of life, and they are archipelagoes of life. They connect the forests to the pastures through the croplands. And as human populations grow, to 2050 we imagine we're going to be 9 billion people on Earth. There is a tendency to use up more of our natural landscape to produce the food that we need to eat. Within the CGIAR system, within the World Agroforestry Centre, we're working on methods to reduce our consumption of land by introducing trees into those landscapes so that crop productivity goes up, conservation values goes up, the ecosystem services those landscapes produce go up. So trying to get a win-win-win as we connect from forests through the pastoral lands. In pastoral lands, you're looking at trees as a way of increasing the productivity of the cattle, of the milk that has been grown over there. In the crop landscapes, it's about nutrition, it's about improving fertility of the soils, but it's also about connecting the other forms of life that use trees as either for their shade or as a nesting or among the roots for their nutrition. And the links of all of this to human beings in those landscapes. So you take a tree out of a landscape, you're taking a source of shade, you're taking a source of soil fertility, you're taking a source of nutrition, you're taking a place where the children play. It is hugely important to consider trees, but not just any trees. We're really talking about trying to find the right trees for the right spot in those landscapes. And that's essentially the work of my research institute.
Is this message explained to perhaps farming students at agricultural colleges around the world? Because I seem to fly over Europe quite a lot these days, and you look out of the window and you see this kind of patchwork quilt of fields below, but the size of each sort of bit seems to get bigger and bigger these days. And I guess where before you'd have had small bits of land, now you have these huge super farms. Do the messages that you're sort of trying to get out, do they get to the people who need it, the agricultural students who will go on to be the farmers of tomorrow?
Again, a very good question. I think not enough. I think the problem we have is that we've segmented the world. We like to put things in cupboards, in drawers, and then close them and then feel that, because it looks neat and tidy, that it's sorted. I was just in Sweden the other week, and we were just discussing this problem where there was huge interest in the agriculture, huge interest in forests, but no connection between agriculture and forests. And so it is really important that this message gets out, that as we understand that everything in the world is linked, as we understand that the climate is a complex system and a butterfly's wings over the Amazon causes rainfall in China, so we must understand that croplands, pastoral lands, forests are all interlinked. And for a farmer, this is what they see. They're not farmers just on their croplands, they're also users of the forests, they're users of the pastures, and they manage it as a whole. Yet our science has been divided up, our policy making and our governance has been divided up. So we have a Ministry of Agriculture, which is often at loggerheads with the Ministry of Environment, who may actually not understand that the Ministry of Forestry is also important. So we've kind of divided up the world in ways that is not useful. And if there's anything we've understood in the last 20 years from complexity science and managing of complex systems, is that we need to start understanding how to manage integrated wholes. So I think this message is starting to get out, but until we reform the way we teach, the reform the way we learn, and the reform the way we act, we are still going to be faced at boundary problems between each of these systems. Agroforestry and trees in particular is a way to combine among these. So you can look at a tree and it goes from the top, from 4,000 meters, right down into the sea with its feet wet for half the day. So these are organisms that allow us to bind landscapes together. So we're talking about in the context of climate change, of climate-smart landscapes. Now, if you take the discussions, we have the whole RED instrument for forests, we have a payments for environmental services system for conservation areas, we're talking about climate-smart agriculture for agriculture, and we're treating these as three separate silos. Yet the world is not full of silos. The world is full of landscapes where people live, where life forms exist, and we need to start understanding these landscapes and treating them as wholes. Otherwise, we will be perpetuating policies that create holes in those landscapes, sinks into which degradation, poverty, and conflict emerge from. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess a final point, we're talking about bringing all these things together and convincing people to change. I guess the best way to convince policymakers and farmers to change is to be able to say, well, look, if you do this, you'll be able to grow more crops, or you will be more resilient. Can you do that? Have you done that?
Yeah, well, I mean, in Western Kenya, we have landscapes which, if you fly over them, they look like forests. So we were out there recently, about 3 weeks ago, talking to this one farmer. He was an older guy, and the average age of farmers is now around 50. The younger people don't want to come into farms because there's no future there. And along came his son, who was a 23-year-old, and we said, well, what do you do? The answer we expected was, well, I'm studying at the local university to get my degree in management. He said, no, I'm a farmer too. And I said, how come? He said, well, what we've done here, while we've integrated cattle, dairy cattle, trees and crops, is giving me so much extra revenue that I can actually make a living out of this and continue the tradition of my family. But I can do this in ways that I couldn't do before, because I can reinvest in the land, I can get qualified help. He was a member of a dairy cooperative, which is basically creating a milk revolution in Kenya. But at the same time, he says, I can send my kids to school, I can live in a house, I can subscribe to the local satellite television provider. I can live a modern life because I can earn enough money. So I think there are solutions out there, and I think we need to attract the youth back into land management, not let them just flee into the cities, particularly the ones who have something to contribute. And I think there are solutions out there that allow us to do this. For one of these success stories, we of course have many others which are not, because we have a huge capacity problem. We do need to reach out to people. We need to invest massively in this kind of agriculture, and that is not happening so far, but I remain an optimist.